to understand primitive painting, you must know first of all that this sort of art has existed since men lived in caves and painted or carved the life and objects about them. It was a pure, unschooled expression of what they felt about what they saw. The Australian Aborigines, who depended upon animals for food and clothing, left paintings of these animals on rock. Later, early Europeans and Americans recorded scenes inspired by their everyday life and their religious beliefs. Among the most important of the contemporary primitive painters was Henri Rousseau, the French customs officer, who painted in his spare time. In this sober wedding group, we see, no doubt, friends or relatives of the artist. He painted from his imagination, too, mysterious countries he had never seen. By seeking infinite realism, by painting each leaf on each tree, Rousseau, like all primitives, unconsciously gave poetry to his work. You may perhaps think these paintings crude or comical, and certainly they are often as candid as the work of a child. But if you look at them carefully, you will, I think, grasp the charm of their color and design. These are paintings by Marie Bouchard. About 300 of her canvases are now in museums and private collections throughout America. The artist and her family appear in this picture, entitled The Feast of the Wise Men. Here, Alain and Aline are depicted driving their harnessed cats. Pure fantasy, but an excellent example of naive painting. Wonderlands, mysteries, nostalgia, all find a place in Marie's art. Flowers that she picked and arranged in strange vases became a part of this wonderland, where flowers have no Latin names, but exist simply in exotic abundance. Marie Bouchard started to paint only 8 years before her death, but her paintings have had a profound influence on her younger sister, Cécile. This is a painting by Cécile of the old mill where she lives. It is situated in the county of Charlevoix, about 70 miles below Quebec City, north of the St. Lawrence, a few miles up the Rivière du Gouffre near the town of Baie-Saint-Paul. And there today stands the old Moulin César, where the Bouchards live. In this beautiful and peaceful atmosphere, Cécile works surrounded by an admiring and creative family. Alain and Aline think she is wonderful, and well they might. It's fun to have a sister who paints. Meanwhile, the memory of Marie and her paintings is a constant inspiration. No one is idle in this family. Sisters Annette and Laure hook rugs with designs of nearby scenes and flowers when they are not helping with the housework. Cécile's father carves in the time left over between sawing wood at the mill and working on the farm. A brother, Stanley, well known for his wood carving, spends his free minutes on hunting scenes, animals, and religious figures. In the summer, he sells them to tourists at his shop in Murray Bay. Laure, her brother Lucien, and sister Mary Edith also find it difficult to resist the carving tools. Mary Edith is already very skillful in her execution of animals. The farmyard animals, which naturally surround the Bouchards' house, are a great source of interest to all members of the family. Cécile sits watching them for hours before she finally paints them, and then, surprisingly, she draws them from memory, not from life. Remembering them, they become part of a carefully thought-out composition, which she draws on a piece of rayon silk glued to a board. On summer days, when the sun is not too hot, Cécile frequently paints out of doors, But she is not painting from nature. She is simply outside because it is pleasanter there. The subject she is working on is recorded in minute detail in her head. Oil paint is Cecile's medium. And she always starts at the top. That is, she puts in the sky first and brushes the paint down. Like her sister Marie, she rubs in the paint with her brush for grass or branches in the manner of the old chromo paintings. But unlike most artists, she makes a small sketch after the large one is completed. She files it in a loose leaf book, and it is for herself to keep and remember. Cécile doesn't only paint landscapes. She likes interiors, like this family dinner, for instance, full of familiar people and the knives and forks and plates that she uses every day. Or scenes like this, with vegetables on the table, a minutely detailed painting of household life. We come now to Alfred Deschênes' paintings. He, like Marie and Cécile, finds inspiration in the things about him. Boys fishing, perhaps, or the beautiful countryside of Quebec. He lives further down the river than the Bouchards, near the town of Marie Bay in the village of Palardy, which overlooks the St. Lawrence. A far cry from the popular conception of the artist in his lonely garret, Deschênes lives with his wife, his 5 children, and his widowed mother. After making a small sketch from nature or imagination on a bit of paper, he then enlarges it on the back of an old election poster. And helped or hindered by his children, he then fills in the enlarged drawing with colored pencils. Some of his drawings are inspired by scenes that he has observed on his Sunday walks. Once the colored sketch is finished, it is carefully traced on beaver board or gyprock with salesbook carbon paper. Then comes the most important part, the oil color, which he puts in all over the board, not in the systematic top-to-bottom style of Cécile Bouchard. Oh, I had forgotten to tell you what Freddie does for a living. He operates a bottling machine in the Marie Bay soft drink plant. But on weekends, on his days off, and in the evenings, Freddie paints. Freddie is a happy person and gets great satisfaction when a picture is finished. Freddie is free from the worries of what critics will think of his work, for his critics are never failing in their enthusiasm. Besides, the important thing is the act of painting. Interiors, groups of people, mythical children who live among fairies and water lilies and huge tropical flowers present no technical or intellectual problems for him. In painting things as he sees them, he leads us into a world where fantasy always hovers and where realism is astonishingly innocent. Now we come to another primitive painter from Charlevoix, Anne Simard. She lives close to Baie-Saint-Paul, near a small village called Petite Rivière Saint-François, a narrow strip of land squeezed between the mountain and the shore. The sugar bush is right at the foot of the mountain, and Marianne often walks there with her dog Pierre. Her house and the activities around it appear in most of her paintings. And simple preparations for lunch in the open air will give her an idea for a picture. Her father and brothers working on the farm, building their eel traps on the shore, or fishing or hunting, are all good materials for Marianne. Careful advanced planning of the entire composition in her mind makes it possible for her to draw directly onto the board or canvas. Once the drawing is completed, she uses an easel, and like Cécile Bouchard, she paints from the top down. Her work, as she says herself, is instinctive. In placing two colors next to one another, she doesn't know if one will accentuate or diminish the intensity of the other. As long as the combination is pleasing to her eye, that is all that matters. Marianne has no theories about painting and no desire to theorize. She likes to be free to express herself in paint, uninfluenced by conventions or schools. Marianne is better known for the excellence of her still lifes. Before painting a picture like this, she will observe the objects on the table for a long time examining the position and color of each object in relation to the others. Then she will reflect upon it for many days, and while her memory is still fresh, set it down in paint as she remembers it. Anne Simard will go a long way. Her pictures are already being widely appreciated both here and abroad. Let us now look at the work of another good Charlevoix primitive, who is widely known in the States. He is Robear Cochon, the most picturesque of them all, who lives at the head of the Murray Bay Valley near the small paper mill town of Clermont. Cochon lives alone in a house he built himself with the savings of many years. Following some personal whim, he painted the planks pink and then covered them with shingles. Inside, the walls are lined with an odd assortment of planks, cardboard, and bits of felt paper. The ceilings are unfinished, and you may put your foot through the floor at any moment. But who cares? Art comes first, and material comfort can wait. His hobby is the violin. His idol is Paganini, the greatest of the ancient violinists whose life he once read. The walls of his house are covered with paintings, flowers, landscapes, and visions of the end of the world, where stars and planets collide and explode. His studio is upstairs. Here, the artist paints entirely from memory. He works out his compositions in the most haphazard manner imaginable, using watercolor or poster paint on large sheets of cardboard. All his paintings begin this way, whether they are scenes inspired by the surrounding country, by the interiors of friends' houses, or by illustrations in a child's primer. After a neat drawing to indicate the forms and the objects, he applies the color all over in a very unorthodox way. And why not? It's the result that counts. And besides, there's no time to be orthodox. Too much of his life has gone by already in helping his father with carriage making and wrought iron work. Today, Robert Cauchon is 30. There is no more time to waste. At 19, he met Pat Morgan, a young American painter who is a professor of art appreciation at a university near Boston, and who has had a great influence on Cauchon. In fact, all these painters, although self-taught, have been intelligently advised and encouraged by Canadian and American artists who spend each summer in Charlevoix County. But in helping these local artists to sell their pictures and in criticizing their work, they have done nothing to influence their way of painting or alter the candor with which they approach their subjects. Robear Cochon does not live on art alone. In winter, he wields an axe for short periods in the lumber camps, and in the spring and autumn, if the black flies are not too vicious, he collects balsam gum from its pouches on the trunks of firs. Selling it by the pound to some pharmaceutical companies provides him with a small income for food and materials. He works in order that he may paint, and painting is a pleasure. There is nothing sophisticated in his interpretation. An intellectual would find it impossible to think in these terms. If you are sensitive to nature and to your environment, perhaps some of you may possess a hidden talent. You could paint if you tried. It's not easy. It's not just a matter of brushes and paints. But if you work with sincerity, if you have a fresh sense of observation, you may accomplish enough to experience the joy of creative achievement that only the artist knows.